Whether you're sending a cold email, or you're running an ad, or you're posting on social media, or you're doing a sales presentation, or you're meeting a prospect at an industry event, behind every single one of those sales and marketing activities is your go-to-market message. Here's a big question though. Did you thoughtfully create your go-to-market message? Because are all those activities, that's the core kernel that's driving it all. If your prospects are nodding, if they are clicking, if they're converting, then chances are your go-to-market message is pretty good. If they're not, then chances are you kind of skip that step and jumped to the activities. In this episode, I'm gonna walk you through the 3 principles that you absolutely need to know on how to revamp your go-to-market message so that all your sales and marketing activities are effective when you actually put them out there. And when you apply these principles, you will be able to accelerate your path to that next stage of growth. Intro. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Unstoppable. I'm TK, and on this channel, I help SaaS founders like you grow your businesses faster with an unstoppable strategy. Now, if you're new to this channel, welcome. I drop an episode every single Sunday with actionable strategies and tactics from the trenches on how to grow your SaaS business faster. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon, that way you'll get notified every single time I drop an episode with the TK energy. Now, if you're already part of this community, if you're part of my SaaS go-to-market coaching programs, you've been subscribed to this channel, people, welcome back. It's really awesome to see you over here. First of all, Happy New Year. I'm filming this as the first episode in the new year for 2024. And second of all, we just hit 57,000 subscribers, which is incredible. So I'm really happy to see you over here. Now, I remember when I first started my company, I had moved to San Francisco from New York City. This was my last company, ToutApp. And at that time, San Francisco didn't really have great public transport. In fact, it still doesn't today. And I didn't own a car because I had moved there from New York City. I would take an Uber every morning. And this was in the super early days of Uber. And it was kind of counterintuitive, but I did the cost-benefit of analysis of sitting in the wrong train and taking forever versus taking an Uber and writing it off as an expense. Because I took an Uber, because it was the early days, every single morning, the Uber driver, who was always super friendly, whoever I got, was like, hey, what do you do? And I would say, oh, I run a startup. And because it was San Francisco, circa 2010, 2011, they'd always ask like, oh, what does your startup do? And every single time I would explain what my startup did, except every single time I would use a slightly different answer. What I noticed was I would get an immediate feedback loop on whether that person got it or they were more confused about what I was saying. So every day, twice a day, I had an opportunity to give my go-to-market message and get real-time feedback on if an average person on the street driving an Uber would understand what I'm saying. This is when I truly understood the power of go-to-market messaging, because immediately I would see, oh, if I say it in simpler terms, they understand it just a little bit better. When I use complicated words, they don't understand it. This is where I truly discovered the power of go-to-market messaging and really forced me to research all the things around what goes into a go-to-market message. How do you make it effective? Fast forward to today, sales engagement, which didn't exist as a category when we first started, is a $5 billion category now with amazing companies, probably one of them that's gonna go public really soon. But in the early days, we really had to get our messaging right because no one knew what that category was and what we were selling. So in this episode, based on everything that I've learned, I'm gonna walk you through the 3 principles that helps you develop your go-to-market messaging framework without having to ride an Uber every day, because let's be honest, Uber drivers don't really care anymore. They're just complaining about how they don't get paid enough these days. They don't ask about what you do. So if you're excited to dig into principle number 1, go ahead and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. It just loves it when you do that. Let's get right into it. So principle number 1 is what I call my grandma at Thanksgiving principle. Let me explain. So every founder always wonders, like, do I need this messaging thing? Is mine any good? Is the ad working? Is the homepage right? So I always go to the grandma at Thanksgiving principle. The grandma at Thanksgiving principle is picture you're at Thanksgiving and grandma asks you what you do, or what you've been up to, or what your company does. And she's a little bit hard of hearing, she's getting up there in age, she thinks in simple terms, but she understands the internet, and you're like, well, we do a startup and we make a software company, and then a bunch of words come out. The grandma at Thanksgiving is a good litmus test on whether your messaging resonates with grandma or not. If you can explain it in terms where grandma's like, oh wow, that's cool, I'm really proud of you, then you're onto something. If she's more like, oh, that's good for you, and she kind of goes to the next person because she's immediately disappointed in you, then chances are your messaging is not good enough. Another way to think about this grandma at Thanksgiving principle for your go-to-market messaging is think of an SDR. This is a sales development rep that you hired because you're scaling. Think of that sales development rep at an industry conference. Think about that industry conference during happy hour after the conference is over and people are all getting together, and your SDR meets a very high value prospect. This is a prospect that you would love to have as a customer. And that prospect at the bar, at the noisy bar, happens to ask your SDR, hey, what do you guys do? And your SDR answers with 1 or 2 sentences because that's all you're gonna get. That's the only chance you're gonna get to get their attention. Those 2 sentences is the core of your go-to-market messaging. And that's the same as this grandma principle. Those 2 sentences is what I gave that Uber driver, or I tested with that Uber driver every single morning. Those 2 sentences is the essence of what your messaging is. And if you can honestly answer to yourself what that would be, what that SDR would say on the second week on the job in a noisy bar at an industry conference to a high value prospect, or what you would say to grandma, then you can really be intellectually honest with yourself on if your messaging is any good. One of the things that I came across recently, I was at a website. This is a founder I came across, and on the website, they were talking about how they are AI cubed. And I'm like, we basically don't even know what AI is even going to be. No one knows what AI cubed is. So this is kind of principle number 1, where the first step in any messaging exercise, any framework that you follow, is to really understand if your messaging is any good, if grandma's gonna understand it, or an SDR can explain it in a noisy conference at a bar to a high value prospect at the end of the day. That's the bar we're reaching for. Why? Because it's a noisy world. If you can't simplify what you do into a few words, into a few sentences that you can explain in a very time-crunched way, if you can't do that, then you don't stand a chance with any ad, any email copy, any social media posts, any industry conference, because people are busy and there's competition with clearer messaging. So that's principle number 1. Once you have kind of taken stock and maybe recovered a little bit from the fact that your messaging may not be the greatest as it could be, or you're just completely horrified at the thought of what the SDR might actually say about what your company does or what you might actually say to grandma, now comes the actual framework on what are the key pieces you need to develop or revamp your messaging. So that's principle number 2. Messaging can be a very broad body of knowledge, but there's 3 core components that goes into messaging. If you actually go Google for go-to-market messaging framework, people totally overcomplicate it. In some cases, there are 80-person teams just working on messaging, but you're a founder, it's all on you. You got to figure this out. And having done this so many times, having coached so many founders on their messaging, I've distilled it down to 3 core components that you really need to figure out. The first component of your messaging framework that you have to figure out is who. Who specifically are you serving? If you're trying to serve everyone out there, then chances are your message is going to be very diluted. If you get very specific, so for example, when I was playing around with it, I used to say, oh, people that send a lot of emails. That was one of my early value props. Then I said, no, it's for salespeople, and salespeople have to follow up with lots of leads, and therefore they need an email tool. Who you're serving and getting specific about that is core to developing your proper messaging. Whenever I work with founders on their go-to-market strategy, one of the things I do is an ICP exercise. That's an ideal customer profile. Everyone thinks they have an ICP, and once they start working with me, they're like, oh, we didn't have an ICP. And we do a 29-point exercise. The reason we do this is the better and more specific you are about your ideal customer, the better your messaging is going to be. So one of the first things in your messaging component that you have to figure out is who you're serving, who this is for. The second thing in your messaging framework that you have to figure out is the value you deliver to these people. Ultimately, people don't want more software. They don't want to buy more software. No one does, but they want certain results. They want certain problems solved. So succinctly defining what value they get from your offering that you can explain to grandma, that your SDR can regurgitate in a noisy bar, the better and simpler that is, the more succinct that is, the more effective your messaging is going to be. So who it's for and value is the second component. And then the third one is differentiation. So for example, I can go out there and say, hey, we're the best CRM in the world for salespeople, but Salesforce is, and HubSpot is, and Pipedrive is, and 100 others. SaaS is very noisy, and chances are there is competition. Even if you don't think there's any competition, in the mind of your ideal customers, there's always some competition. When we were starting out, we would say, oh, we're email for salespeople. We help them follow up on leads, and we help them do cold outreach. You'd say, oh, it's kind of like MailChimp. And we'd be like, nope, that's for marketing. This is for salespeople. So even if you don't think there's any competition, your customers in their minds will always think of a competition, whether it's doing nothing or a spreadsheet or an actual software product. So a key component to your messaging is to actually explain your differentiation. So for example, one of the things we evolved to was like, hey, you know, with salespeople, they have to send like 5, 10 emails and phone calls to follow up on a lead and turn it into a real opportunity. Well, we automate that. That's what completely shifted the dynamic from us sounding like an email tool, maybe for marketers, to like, oh no, this is a very specific problem for salespeople that we solve a value for. Differentiation is one of the things that often gets forgotten. You go back to that founder who's talking about how they're AI cubed or AI squared, I forget which one it was. There's no differentiation. It's unclear what the value is, and it's unclear who it's for in a very noisy space around AI. So they were failing all three of these components. But in your case, you have to think about what these three components are: who it's for, what the value is, and what the differentiation is. You do all three of these, then your messaging actually starts to come together. Once you start to get some messaging, you know who it's for, you know what the value is, you know what the differentiation is. Those are the three key components to a messaging framework. Then comes in the third principle. Now, before I go into that, because this is what brings it all together, let me just pause here for a second. Are you starting to see the power in this? Are you starting to see the power of, if you do some of this work around your messaging and you really figure out how to get it right, especially across these three components in this framework, you can really, really change the game on every single sales and marketing activity that you're running. If you're starting to see the power in this, can I just get a yes in the comments below? And also smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. It just loves it when you do that, and so do we. We put a lot of love into these episodes. Also, if you're at the stage where you're looking to grow your SaaS business and you're like, look, I need a proper go-to-market strategy. I need to actually revamp my messaging so that we actually stand out in the market. I need to figure out how we actually communicate what we do in the market more effectively. And you want some help with that. This is why I run my SaaS go-to-market coaching program. You don't have to go anywhere right now. I'll tell you more about it at the end of this episode. I'll link to it below. Let's go to principle number 3. So principle number 3 is, once you have the litmus test of like, okay, Grandma Thanksgiving or SDR at a noisy conference, like is ours good? Is ours bad? Where do we stand? What's the bar for great messaging? And then you start to think about, well, what are the 3 components to this messaging framework and what are they for us? Then it comes to the critical component. This is where you actually deploy the messaging. So principle number 3 is messaging deployment and iteration. This is a very complicated sounding thing, but it's super simple. You have a message. You need to actually get it in front of your ideal customers, and you need to actually test it. The way you do that is, well, you could send a cold email, you could post on social media, you could run ads, you could go to an event, you could ride an Uber and test it out if that's your target market now. You could do any number of those things. All of those are different channels where you can get your message out in front of your customers. So that's the first piece. You need to have the right channel. The second piece is you need to actually look at your metrics. The first version of messaging is not always the right one. So you always have to look at the metrics to figure out, is it hitting, is it resonating, and iterate from there. And then the third piece is the results. You need to measure your results and see if the messaging is actually yielding revenue, yielding sales calls, yielding free trials, all those pieces. So that's the third piece that a lot of people forget in their messaging exercise. Sometimes they'll do these things. They're like, oh yeah, who, value, differentiation, got it. We are gonna crush it. And then they just forget all about it. What they don't realize is you have to go out there, you have to deploy the message on a consistent basis across key channels. You have to measure the right metrics, and then you have to figure out if it's working or not and iterate from there. The crude example of this is the first time I got in an Uber and they asked me, I gave them a paragraph long answer, and the guy was like, oh, that's cool, and didn't ask a follow-up question at all, which meant that he didn't understand it. So then I iterated on it. The next day, I thought about a different, more succinct way to do it. And the next day it got better, and the next day it got better. So that's an example of looking at a feedback loop and improve it. And the more you iterate on your messaging, the more effective it's going to be, which is why it's super important to A, get your message out there. So that's the deployment. And then you have to iterate on it based on the metrics and the results that you're getting. So let's recap. This is the 3 core principles for having an effective go-to-market message, the framework that I follow whenever I work with founders. Number 1, first, do a litmus test on Grandma at Thanksgiving or that SDR at an industry conference. Would they be able to actually understand what your company does with your current messaging? Then, if you're going to revamp your messaging or create it for the first time, go across these 3 components. Who's it for? What's the value? And what's the differentiation? Once you have that, then you need to deploy that messaging across key channels, look at the metrics, and based on the results that you're seeing and the metrics that you're seeing, iterate it to make it better and better. You do that and you'll be able to accelerate your growth. And now you know what those 3 principles are. So if you're a founder of a SaaS business and you're like, okay, I really need to get my go-to-market messaging right. I need to get my proper go-to-market strategy, because we can't keep doing the random sales and marketing activities. We need to get the strategy right, and then we need to execute. We need to get our messaging down. We need to get our ideal customer profile done. This is why I created my SaaS go-to-market coaching program. So inside of this program, it's an incredible program. We do 3 key things together. First, we flesh out your ideal customer profile. This really clarifies who it is in the market that you're going to be going after, where you're going to be competing, where the white space is, where you can actually compete. Once you have that, the second piece is your manifesto. Your manifesto is my proprietary way of building out your messaging. It's your value proposition, it's your positioning, it's your differentiation. We work through this together to craft a very, very unique strategic narrative that you can actually use to differentiate yourself in the market. And most importantly, make sure that grandma understands you at Thanksgiving on what exactly your company does and everyone else in your ideal customer profile. Once you have your manifesto, then comes the third part. The third part is what we call the Broadway show. The Broadway show is a consistent set of sales and marketing activities that you run across key channels to bring your manifesto to your ICP on a consistent basis. And I'll teach you exactly what channels to focus on, what metrics to measure, how to iterate on it so that you can actually scale your growth, and more importantly, iterate on your messaging. It's an incredible program. We are entering into the 4th year of running this program. We've had over 250 companies go through the program. We've shared so many amazing success stories on this channel on the people that have gone through the program. We've given out trophies and awards. It's an incredible program. So if you want to work together, just go to tkkader.com/GTM. tkkader.com/GTM. On that page, you'll get all the details about the program. If it sounds like it's a fit, just fill out the little form and book a call with us. Now, the better the fit, the better the results, which is why we ask you to book a call with us. On the call, we'll review where you are with the business and what your goals are and what's holding you back. If it sounds like I can help you inside of the program, then we're off to the races. We'll get started right away. All you have to do is just go to tkkader.com/GTM and all the details will be there. Also, if you got value from this video, please smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. It just loves it when you do that. So do we. We put a lot of love into these videos. If you have a fellow founder, if you're part of a WhatsApp group or a Slack group or a community of other founders, please share this video with them. We want to serve as many founders like you as possible and help you all build incredible SaaS companies. We just hit 57,000 subscribers, which is incredible. It's truly an honor and a privilege to serve you in this way. We want to amass as many founders as possible in this community and serve everyone so we can all build incredible companies together. Also, I drop an episode every single Sunday with actionable strategies and tactics from the trenches on how to grow your SaaS business faster. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and that bell icon so you'll get notified every single time I drop an episode. And lastly, remember, everyone needs a strategy for their life and their business. When you are with us, yours is going to be unstoppable. I'm TK, and I'll see you in the next episode or inside the SaaS Go-to-Market Coaching Program. Take care, everybody. Is to understand why you actually need messaging. Ooh, a little rusty, 2 weeks. Let me get some tea and we'll dig into it. The better the fit, the better the results. So this is why I'm never skipping a week again. Jesus, I get a little rusty.